Hello, I'm Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. If you have a question or would like to schedule an appointment with me, you can reach me at shrinkformen@gmail.com. The topic of this video is professional victims aren't really victims. This is from an article that I wrote back in 2017, if you'd like to find it on my website. Does your spouse blame you for everything that's wrong in the marriage? Do they refuse to take responsibility for their actions, especially the cruel and deceitful ones? Do you frequently feel forced into acts of contrition, like you're forever obligated to make it up to your partner, girlfriend, or boyfriend? If so, you may be involved with a professional victim. Don't be fooled. Professional victims aren't really victims. Professional victim is a more common term for victim playing, which comes from transactional analysis, and it's a concept first described by Eric Berne in The Games People Play, published in 1964. Victim playing is, and I quote, the fabrication of victimhood for a variety of reasons, such as to justify abuse of others, to manipulate others, a coping strategy, or attention seeking. Now, if you're thinking, gee, that sounds like something that narcissists and borderlines do, then move to the head of the class. You're exactly right. It's what many narcissists and other personality disordered abusers do. Object relations theorist D.W. Winnicott introduced the notions of the true self and the false self in the maturational process and the facilitating environment, Studies in the Theory of Emotional Development, published in 1965. According to Winnicott, narcissists develop a false self in infancy as a defense mechanism to protect them from the lack of parental emotional attunement. And emotional attunement means parents consistently respond to and meet the infant's needs so that the infant feels loved and secure. The false self is a false persona built on false relationships, for example, through projection, mirroring, idealization, and other kinds of primitive defense mechanisms, and introjections, or unconsciously incorporating characteristics and attitudes of others in an effort to appear authentic. And this patchwork quilt of a false self masks, and again I quote here, a barren emptiness behind an independent seeming facade. And that's from Rosalind Minsky in Psychoanalysis and Gender. Neville Symington believes that a false self leads to a, I quote, permanent sense of victimization, end quote. And it's that permanent sense of victimization that in turn gives birth to the professional victim. Playing the victim is a position of power in interpersonal relationships. And you might be wondering, how can a victim be powerful? In reality, the professional victim is often the aggressor, particularly if they have traits of narcissism, borderline, or histrionic personality disorder, and/or psychopathy. They play the victim to manipulate, exploit, and control victims, enablers, and/or their negative advocates. In other words, they're flying monkeys who protect and defend the professional victim and attack the professional victim's actual victims. Narcissists and other professional victims hold you emotionally hostage by using abuse tactics such as blame shifting, projection, DARVO, which is a concept that Dr. Jennifer Fried of the University of Oregon writes about. It stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender, and FOG, or fear, obligation, and guilt. Professional victims are stealth bullies. Being caught in a never-ending blame game with one of these individuals is toxic in the extreme. It's not a game you can win. It doesn't matter how many facts you present or how logical your observations and counter arguments are. It's extremely unlikely that a narcissist/professional victim will give up the mantle of victimhood. It would require them to take responsibility for their actions, abdicate their gross sense of entitlement and their compulsion to control. Being in control of their environment and relationships gives the narcissist's false self the illusion of safety and protection from exposure and the potential loss of supply. And that's simply, the narcissist simply is not going to allow that to happen. And here are some characteristics of professional victims. 1, professional victims and narcissists rarely, if ever, possibly never, apologize. The narcissist has exclusive rights to the role of injured party. When you call them on their behavior, they will provide ample excuses for why they're not responsible. The excuses typically redirect blame onto you or other scapegoats. And again, this is usually the person that the narcissist has wronged. It's always your fault or someone else's fault, but never ever is it the narcissist's fault unless it somehow serves their self-serving agenda. Or a joke I like to make, it's not really funny. There was the movie Love Story, which was a book by Eric, I can't remember who wrote it, I'm blanking on that. Anyway, it starred Ally McGraw and Ryan O'Neal. It was early 70s. A tearjerker, as my mother would say. And one of the more famous lines from the movie was when the Ally McGraw character said to Ryan O'Neal, "Love means never having to say you're sorry." My take on that is being a narcissist means never having to say you're sorry because, hey, if you're never wrong, what is there to apologize for? Okay. 2, professional victims push people's buttons to get emotional responses. A determined narcissist could make the Dalai Lama lose his cool. Professional victims often have scripts in their head about how interactions with others are supposed to go. Non-disordered people have scripts too, again, expectations how others will respond and interact with us. But our scripts aren't rigid, and we can adapt when people don't respond in the ways that we think or hope that they will. Narcissists don't. If reality doesn't match their internal script, they'll make it fit. Facts and reality do not matter. Many of my clients have described how they get into these conflicts where they have really no idea what their narcissistic or borderline spouse is on about. It's like they have some TV psychodrama going on in their head that only they have the script for, and it doesn't matter what the facts are. They're going to keep pushing until they get whatever the outcome it is that they want, which is typically, my client is the great big jerk and they're the victim. It's really crazy making. The professional victim must be victimized. For example, your sister needles and needles and needles one of your sore spots until you can't take it anymore and snap at her. She just got you to victimize her. The previous 2 hours during which she tormented and bullied you are irrelevant. Or your husband, who's having an affair, picks a fight with you to manufacture a reason to storm out to go have a rendezvous with his affair partner. The fight is your fault, and cheating on you is your fault because professional victim. If you weren't such a disappointment, he wouldn't have to cheat on you, and therefore wouldn't have had to pick a fight with you and other ridiculous nonsense. There is a twisted pretzel logic to their reasoning, messed up as it is. It's not a formal logic that most other people would recognize, but they do have some kind of rationale to their twisted thinking. A lot of times this is reflects a very primitive defense mechanism called projective identification. Object relations psychologist Melanie Klein first introduced the concept in 1946. R.D. Lang explained it as, and I quote, "The one person does not use the other merely as a hook to hang projections on. He or she strives to find in the other or to induce the other to become the very embodiment of their projection." As crazy as this sounds, it's a defense mechanism the narcissist uses as a means to control you, the receptacle, into which they've projected the bad parts of themselves. Originally, I was going to use the word vessel, but receptacle seems more appropriate given that they are essentially vomiting their emotional and psychological waste material onto you. The way I distinguish the difference between projection and projective identification is that, and this is kind of gross, so I apologize, when a narcissist or borderline projects onto you, it's like you're getting vomit on your shirt. When it's projective identification, it's like they're force feeding you their emotional vomit. I know, gross, but that's how I remember it. Now, if you are the receptacle, it is a truly awful experience. In extreme cases, it can lead you to feel like the crazy person. The narcissist or professional victim projects their aggression onto you as well. A lot of my clients engage in Jade. For those of you who don't know that acronym, that stands for justify, argue, defend, and explain. The narcissist will persist in blame shifting, discounting, derailing, and other provocations until you, for example, tell them to shut the heck up and leave you alone. Again, as soon as they get that emotional response, and that's often the whole point to having a conflict, right? Is so that they can keep reenacting this perceived victimhood. So they push, needle, poke, berate, bait. In the conflict it's very rarely about reaching a resolution or solving a problem. It's about getting the other person to have an intense emotional response so that then the narcissist or borderline can flip it around and play the victim. Why they do this and why this is a meaningful experience for them is another topic. Maybe I'll do another video on it. Okay. A third characteristic of professional victims is blaming others for their own shortcomings and failures. The professional victim lives in never, never take personal responsibility land, which is bordered to the north by the land of if only. The narcissist's refusal to hold themselves accountable allows them to blame their parents, siblings, coworkers, bosses, professors, partners, whomever, for their unhappiness, their poor life choices, their poor career choices, and failed relationships. You know, he'd be running the business if only his boss recognized his talents, and she'd have graduated from culinary school and been wildly successful as a cupcake boss if only her professor hadn't looked at her cross-eyed when she sneezed. And she wouldn't have to be so hard on you, i.e. abusive, if you did more of X, Y, and Z. This is malarkey, okay? The professional victim's right in that someone is to blame for their sad life, and they need only look in the mirror to direct their blame accurately. 4, professional victims admire and respect bullies. Now, this isn't in every single case, but I've seen this time after time where professional victims actually admire people who are bullies. And it really is fascinating. They seem to look up to and respect the people that they cannot control and or fear. And they typically fear people they can't control. And then conversely, they lash out and abuse the people who are actually trying to help them. And remember this, if you're still in a relationship with one or have a narcissistic or borderline parent whom you're trying to help who continues to abuse you as you're trying to help them, that is unlikely to ever change. Common example, again, that some of my clients have experienced is a wife who, you know, a narcissistic or borderline wife who recalls fondly an ex who was allegedly quite abusive to her. It's odd, but I think the important thing to remember about that is that human beings, we tend to emulate the people that we admire. And if your narcissistic partner admires bullies and other abusers, despots, tyrants, criminals, etc., they are likely going to emulate that behavior. So take that for what it's worth. The fact that narcissists and other professional victims admire and respect bullies and other people who abuse their power over others should be a huge red flag to you. Again, because we emulate the people we admire. And just to make this crystal clear, they admire other bullies and abusers because they themselves are abusive bullies masquerading in victims' clothing. It's impossible to have a loving, equal relationship with a professional victim. Narcissists and other professional victims want control and power, not equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. And most importantly, professional victims don't actually want to be helped or saved or fixed. They want to be enabled so that they don't have to change. That is key. These individuals go through life feeling slighted and angry, evading responsibility, and blaming others for their choices, actions, and failures. Good luck trying to talk to them about this. You'll likely be met with extreme defensiveness, blame shifting, and even narcissistic rage or borderline rage. Since their primary identity is that of victim, if they give up their false self, then who are they? An empty shell of a person who treats other people like garbage and who's squandering their life away, not taking responsibility for themselves or their own happiness. For them, it's a matter of psychological self-preservation versus annihilation. To repeat, you can't have a healthy and happy relationship with someone who holds you emotionally hostage and controls you through guilt, emotional blackmail, and blame. This type of person rarely changes and usually has characteristics of one of the dramatic cluster B personality disorders, including borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder, or some combination of all of these. If you're involved with one of these individuals, please reconsider the relationship. Why are you staying? What are you getting out of it? It surely isn't love, at least not in the adult sense of the word. Again, I'm Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. If you have a question or would like to schedule a session with me, you can reach me at shrinkformen@gmail.com. Thank you for watching.